Let's keep things moving here on the program. Joined by a gentleman, as a matter of fact, he's an actor, and as you know, the actors are currently on strike, so we're not going to talk about the show he's on. But those that are watching will know what show I'm talking about, and those that are listening will try to enable for you to figure it out. Played 6 seasons in the National Football League, so graduate of Morehouse HBCUs in the building. He's got this shirt on right there. Played football at Morehouse, of course. We are joined by Isaac Keys. What's going on, Isaac? Welcome to the program.
Hey man, thank you. Thank you for having me, man. Yeah, it's a great intro. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, to chop it up with you. So, and people out there, they figure it out. They smart. They do their research. So I have no problem about them figuring out about the show.
Yeah, this show, and we'll keep it like that because we want to respect what you and your comrades, if you will, are trying to do with this. Of course, the writers are back to work now, and hopefully you all will be soon. Speak to the importance. I've seen your Instagram post and so forth. I've heard you talk about this. Speak to the importance of this strike.
Well, as you mentioned, you tapped into it. It's the SAG-AFTRA. We're standing strong, and that's our actors union. Right now, the writers have just ended their strike, and we stood in solidarity with them, and they're still standing in solidarity with us. But we were happy that they got their part done because they're making strides. And I think some of the main points about this strike is, some of the things is the residuals. A lot of things right now we're going to streaming networks, and that writers and actors are not seeing their due in the residual aspects. And that why that's important is because when it comes to streaming, the residuals are completely different than it is for like Prime TV, for NBC, CBS. But right now, as everybody knows, that most platforms are moving on to streaming. And with streaming being as such, a lot of times writers and actors are held into exclusive contracts to where they can only work on one show at a time, in some situation in the contract. So that means that when you're out of work for those next 6 months, you can't necessarily work on certain things. So you live off the residuals that you make off of a show. And, so when you be locked in, how the contracts work. So, that part, but a lot of times, you see actors not working, it's because they're able to live off the residuals, and we're not getting just doing that. Then it's going to, put you in a standstill. And as you know, we're on strike, but those bills aren't on strike. And it's not just about actors who you see on TV all the time, you feel like they're making a lot of money. It's about all of us, everybody from the top down to the guys and girls that were just starting. So, it's important to have the residual aspect. Also, AI is coming in, is coming in whether we like it or not on all platforms. And, AI, they can use your likeness. If you don't protect yourself, they can use your likeness for a lifetime. And, if that's the case, you're not getting just doing that aspect. So we need to protect ourselves on that. Healthcare has not been changed since the 80s. The amount that producers had to put into the pot to help, in our union, because in actors, what you understand, some people don't understand is that for us to have our healthcare, you have to make a certain amount of money to be assured to have a certain type of plan in your healthcare. So if you're not working, if you're not receiving residuals like that, then you don't meet that plan. So then you have to seek healthcare outside of that, which can be very pricey as well. Those are probably 3 main points, and I think there's also some more. But those are the 3 main points that we're really fighting for, and I think we're making strides.
I think what's interesting is you've seen a side of this as a former National Football League player, as a matter of fact. And when I hear you speak about it, it takes me back to I can't remember when you were playing, if there was a strike, but there has been a strike since you were playing. So kind of speak to that. This is it's important, but this is very, very, and you speak as such, very, very important to you.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, I think it's the people at the top, and the studios and the NFL teams, the owners like that, they are making a substantial amount of money. And, they do their best to keep that money and just keep everyone else just happy. But as these contracts come up, it's the evolution of the game. It's the evolution of acting and streaming, that things have to change. And I think it's only right to change because there is room. It's room. It's almost upsetting that people don't want to share some of the pot. The pot holders don't want to share some of the pot, and they give you enough just to keep you happy at that moment, or seem like you're getting something. But there's so much more, especially with like you say, in football, players putting their lives on the line, and our unions like NFLPA has done a great job of starting to really tap into those, to try to give those resources to former and active players, because you're putting your life on the line, and once it's over with, what are you going to do after that? who's helping you with your healthcare after that? Who's helping you, find a job after that? And people think that, oh, well, you make so much money. Well, there's thousands of people in the NFL right now that have the chance to make it 1%, but that doesn't mean everybody's making a substantial amount of money. Those guys running around on kickoff and special teams like players like myself, or jumping around with practice squad active roster, aren't making a substantial amount of money. You end up this game, the NFL stands for not for long. So you end up out the game at 30 years old trying to figure your life out. So helping with those resources, just trying to help you keep your life on track. Just, all the stuff you give on the field, helping us to get stuff off the field to be able to keep our lives on track. And I think it's important to have these unions, that even in the corporate world, that can help, the corporate, the workers and, the worker bees. So I think it's important on all sides. And I'm proud of SAG after all those actors standing strong in solidarity to really make this happen, to get to the table and make some changes.
Sure. Seems like you've always understood it this way, particularly as a former player in the National Football League. Did you, in fact, because to your point, you may not have been making sort of the money in the National Football League at the time that you played. So, I mean, do you have? I guess my question is, seems like you have maybe a better understanding of that and the infrastructure now between the owners, if you will, and then the persons that are doing the work. You seem like you have a better understanding of that now, but you had that previous understanding having played in the league.
I think the understanding comes from being a team player, knowing a role. Like, of course, you have your leaders of a team. Now, I used to be a leader of my team in college. Of course, when I went to NFL, I learned my role from there and who was the leaders of those teams. I think then when you know your role and you are a team player, you understand that, you may not have the same levity as someone else as on the team, but at the same time, if they support you and and believe in you, it's like, okay, we're a team. So we need to stand together to be able to make some changes. Everybody doesn't feel that way. Sometimes you may say, well, I may not have the same feeling, but my team is doing it. My team is involved in it. So what's different is in actors, it's kind of, we have to come together as a team. We're not put together as a team, but when you work on a show such as The Show that I work on now, on other shows, I'm so close with my castmates that I know that if we sit down and have a conversation and say, hey, we need to change something, then we'll stand together. That's what I hope. So I think that's how the team is kind of formed, an aspect from the SAG after side as well as coming from the NFL side.
Actor Isaac, he's former National Football League player as well, and Morehouse graduate, joins us here on the program. Speak to Isaac, how you made the transition from a national or a professional football player to acting.
Wow, yeah, I need to take a sip of water before we go into that one.
All right, that's all good, man. It's all good.
No, I think that's one of the biggest things, and probably one of the hardest parts of any athlete, but I think anybody can relate to that. When you're doing something for over 15 to 20 years, something like that, then all of a sudden you have to make a change. And, especially if it's not a change that is made on your terms, it puts you in a position of like, okay, what am I getting ready to do now? And that thought can be very scary at the time. It can be very, intimidating. I think what I found, and some other people have found as I had these conversations with people, is that it's hard to find that same passion into something else, that you had from that initial job. So I started playing football when I was 7 years old, and I played all the way up until 30, 31, where I'm still holding on. Like I'm fighting for teams to try to, pick me up, or I'm going over to Canada to try to play a year over there to get back into the NFL, and you're still fighting. And it's almost like having a bad relationship. They treat you well sometimes, but you love them so much that you keep on coming back, even though you can't grasp the whole relationship, and you just keep holding on. You talk to your friend, you're like, hey, it's really not good for you. I see it's changing. You need to, move on. Well, you can talk to that person blue in the face until they realize it themselves. So my transition was sort of like that, in the sense where I didn't know what I was going to do. Acting wasn't the first thing that popped up. I didn't know anything about acting. Even when I was playing football, I wasn't necessarily, pursuing acting, saying, hey, that's my next step. I was getting so much into football that it was hard for me to think about what's the next thing I'm going to do. And, I felt like a lot of players have felt that, and a lot of people, in the other position that felt that. So acting kind of found me. because I just saw something in it that was not mundane. It was creative. It was one of those things that was like, it was always different, but it was also me starting completely over, just like football. I had to go into and seek acting classes, move out of Phoenix, Arizona, because Arizona was my last team, move out of Arizona because there was no market for acting, and then move to LA. And I was starting completely over. Now, my transition was different because I didn't leave the league with a certain amount of money. I actually left the league, unfortunately, in probably a broke state, and I'm not afraid to say it. And it happened because I was doing things with real estate. It was 2008. The market crashed, and I had these houses I was trying to flip and turn and things like that. And me not knowing a lot of information, me not knowing and doing the research, knowing I can let those houses go. Instead, I was using my money, the money I had there, to try to keep these houses afloat. Because when I came up, I was like, foreclosure, that's terrible. You don't never let that happen. You don't let this. But when it comes to real estate game, let it go, move on. You'll build your credit and stuff back up. Not knowing those things, I started completely over. Stayed on my cousin's couch in LA, let go of my house in Arizona. And it put me back in a grind mode. And I think that grind mode was important because it put me in a mode where I had to be hungry again. It was frustrating at times, but hungry again, and be able to try to make something else out of nothing, especially another career that is not very forgiving. It's not, it's not a career that's just easily given to you overnight. And one thing mentally I had to do was relinquish and release football. I left at a bitter state. I left at a state from football where it's like I felt like football didn't give me everything that I deserved out of it. I felt as though coaches would tell me, Isaac, you're better than the starters. You're better than the guys in front of you. But we drafted them. We picked you up as a free agent. So it doesn't make sense in the front office for us to put you in this position at some time. See, it's not that you can't play. It's about finding the niche in the organization that will allow you to succeed and to accelerate. You know what I mean? And that's what it's kind of about. You see all these players that get released. There's thousands of hundreds of players that are very good, but you're still about finding that niche, finding that team that's going to be in there and timing, and sometimes those things don't always align. So I left a little bitter in football, and I was holding that back, using that holding, and acting kind of saved me. Acting was my therapy at the time. We didn't know about therapy when I came out. Acting was my therapy, and it helped me release and substitute all those feelings I had inside and be able to put those into different characters and the scenes.
Man, you said a lot right there. Something I want to get back to. You did something because I've been really on this HBCU and free agency player sign, but you said something that may make me think a little bit about that. But let me how difficult at the time was it for you when you were? I mean, obviously now you probably look back and said, "Hey, it was a good thing." Maybe it was a good thing because it's gotten me to this point. But how difficult was it for you at that time when you trying to be in real estate and it just wasn't working out and you had to sleep on, I think you said, your cousin's couch?
I mean, it was probably it was my rock bottom. And I don't say that to be like, oh, I played a victim. I said that at the time that it was my rock bottom. Like I literally called my parents, like, and it took me a long time to do it. Call my parents to ask them for money because I could only had $50 in my account at the time. And it's because it was over a period of time where like, okay, I'm gonna fix this, I'm gonna fix this, I'm gonna fix this. Didn't know how to fix it. So now you come into a desperate mode. I was literally driving in my car one time, went to church. I went to church because usually when you go to church, you want to hear the word. You gotta get that word, it's gonna give you that uplift. And I wanted to hear, I needed him to speak to me, the pastor to speak to me that day. I went to church and I remember being in church, anxious, like give me their words, I can feel it, just to give me that motivation, like that pregame speech or whatever, like that from the coach. And I didn't receive it. And I remember being angry, that I didn't receive this word, this uplift that I needed at the time. I got in my vehicle, I still had a nice vehicle. I'm driving my car. I literally started crying and laughing at the same time in the car. I'm laughing at myself because like, boy, why are you crying? But at the same time, I'm crying. I'm just so hurt and angry inside and feeling ashamed of where I'm at this point. This is before I got into the acting. This is like when I'm trying to figure it out about the football. I'm angry these teams aren't calling me. I'm angry at the Cardinals because they didn't put me on active roster more. So I've been hid, that. But yet the coach telling me like, we should have had you on active roster more. Well, that shoulda, coulda thing is the difference in my life right now. So it's like, that's hurtful. So I'm angry. I'm just built up with anger. And I'm not an angry person, but all this stuff is built up. So that was when, before mental health and all these things involved right now with depression, anxiety, and where that was people even discussing that. They weren't. So all I knew was to suppress it, go work out, or just, but it would become overwhelming. It was seeping out in my relationships, for us with friends and how I was talking to people. I was a different person. And at that point, I really would just had to turn over and just like start reading different books. I had to start Joyce Meyer say that Battlefield of Minds. I had to find ways to try to release. I had people that owed me money, and I'm calling them every day for the money because that money I need that money at the time. I was in a desperate place, and I'm glad I didn't do anything desperate that could have put me down, a rabbit hole, a spiral. But it led me to, like, I had to gather myself up and use that same hunger and that same desire that I used to get into the NFL. I had to use it to transition from the NFL into something else. And I tried multiple things at first, and none of them fit. But when I started getting that acting, I knew it wasn't going to be a straight shot. Like some people just get a chance because of their name from the game. They just get a role. But I didn't have a name for the game. I had a conversational starter, but all I had was a work ethic that I had to keep working. It took me 14 years to get on this show that I'm on now. And people are like, what else you on? They look back and they see you spot me on one other show, as a guest star there. And like, oh, I saw you on that. I see on that, on the series that was on another show, and it's just those things, it was part of like the process, and it's still the process. The grind don't stop. It just changes.
Wow. Isaac, actor, former national football, pro football player, and then, of course, Morehouse grad, Isaac Keys, joining us here on the program. So, you look at the last couple of years in terms of the draft from HBCU players getting drafted. One this past year, you had, I think it was 4. The previous year, you had, I think in 21, 0. Going back to 20, it was like 2. In other words, our players are not getting drafted. And my thing is, okay, when you get drafted, there's some guaranteed money there, in terms of a signing bonus. Of course, there's always advantages, and you would know this best when you sign as a free agent. You can kind of go where you want, to the point you made earlier about that niche and that right fit. Your thoughts on that, but I thought it interesting that you mentioned that it's a real thing that guys from bigger schools or ones that got drafted would play before guys that were from smaller schools or didn't get drafted, just because they got drafted. Like that's a real thing. That's a real thing.
Real thing. It's basically, it has your bet. I think these owners, like the front office, have to still try to look good. And if they spend money on an investment of someone that doesn't necessarily pan out, they have to give everything they can into that, to, an investment to say, okay, why it didn't pan out. Tom Brady had an interview before, and he was talking about how am I supposed to break to the starting lineup if the player in front of me gets 20 reps and I get 3? You understand? Like, so I get 3, they get 20. So I'm learning. My learning has to be mental reps. My learning has to be more off the field and in the classroom, to make the best out of those 3 reps. And even then, it's 3 reps. They're still pressing for the other person to get it. And also, when you go to bigger schools, sometimes I think you have more of a network. A lot of these coaches are from these same schools as well, too, and they can be in an organization as well. So they're rooting for you. So it's like you just have to do twice as much when you come out of a smaller school. Not saying you can't make it happen. It's just some of those are the obstacles that you are facing, doing twice as much. And also, I think it's deemed like my goal was like, I was just underdog. I wasn't expected to go to the league. I was underdog. I was walked on out of college, played opposition my senior year in high school year. So I walked on to college. So I wasn't recruited. Ended up in Morehouse. I went to one school before that, North Alabama, because they had an organization, walked on there. Didn't care for the school at the time. So I ended up going to Morehouse. I couldn't play the first year. I had to sit out because they said I was be a Joe student because I transferred laterally. Found out later on that I could have. And then I played 3 years at Morehouse, 3 years of collegiate football, pretty much, to say that. But my goal was just to dominate where I was, because I just wanted to play football. I love the game. I love everything about the game. I love the camaraderie. I love being part of a team. So I want to play the game. So my suggestion is, people, is no matter where you are, you just have to dominate. You're going to have some different obstacles you have to overcome, but you just have to dominate. Dominate where you are, and then, hopefully they'll find you. You got to, these days now they have a lot of video. You can put a lot of things on Huddle. When I was there, we had the VHS with the static and stuff coming on, trying to make your highlight tape. So it's different, but they can find you, especially now with all technology and everything now. But it's different, man. It's just like someone growing up in poverty, somebody growing up in a prestigious household. It's like you're gonna have different obstacles. Can you reach the same place? But you're gonna have some different challenges to get to that place. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things, and it's life. But I wouldn't change anything about it because I think it built me. Built some character into me that I'm able to use to this day.
Absolutely. Couple of last thoughts with Isaac Keys, who joins us here on the program. He's our celebrity guest picker. So let's get to that. Let's get to the
okay.
You're a celebrity.
Okay.
Let's run the games down. I didn't put your alma mater in this week, man. They just it's just not.
Well, we playing Tuskegee this week, and that's a big for us. No matter what record we have, and right now we're in a very big rebuilding year over at Morehouse College. We have a new head coach, and we're happy about him. He's an alma mater. He's came over from Rice College, and we have a new AD, and Harold Ellis, who was one of our prestigious student athletes out of Morehouse College. Went to the NBA, retired jersey at Morehouse. So we're in a big rebuilding year, and I'm accepting that because I during conversations, I feel like we're heading in the right direction. But Tuskegee, I don't care. Look, no matter what the record is, that's going to be a good game.
Yes, it is.
And I'm picking Morehouse, whether you ask me or not. I'm picking Morehouse College over Tuskegee.
Well, I got you. Okay, good. Now, I'm just saying they should have never. Maybe it was a mutual parting of ways. Known Rich Freeman a long time. Good man, good football coach. But that's another conversation.
It's okay. Richard Freeman, a friend of mine is too, and he did right by the program. But after a certain amount of time, everybody has to move on. That's all that is, I believe.
Okay. All right. So Howard at Harvard, who you got?
Howard at Harvard. I think with that, of course, I want to go with my HBCU, but I actually did a little research on that. And right now, Harvard is kind of on a roll at the moment. And I feel like Harvard right now is going to pull out. Harvard actually started the season a little later, too. So right now, this is that tough part of the season where you're dealing with a lot of injuries. And, that's tough, and you got to overcome that. And I think Harvard starting their season a little later. I think they're a little more fresher at the present moment. So I'm picking Harvard in that game.
Harvard in that game. Okay. Alabama A&M at Grambling.
Alabama A&M at Grambling. That's always an exciting game down there, especially being at Grambling. And at this time of the year, I'm going with Grambling on that one.
Okay. FBS round, Indiana at Michigan.
Indiana at Michigan. Big Blue. I'm choosing Big Blue. I've seen what they've kind of been doing thus far. They're building, getting ready for that Ohio State game. That's what they get ready for. So, and right now, I just think they have a little more firepower and on a different alignment than Indiana at the moment.
Okay. Auburn at LSU.
Auburn at LSU in Death Valley. In that game, that was the one I was like, what do I think about that one? I think I'm going with Auburn. I think Auburn's going to pull that out.
Okay.
I do. I think Auburn's going to pull that out in Death Valley. I like a good upset.
Okay.
Do it.
All right. Sounds good. National Football League. Let's go. Let's go Colts at Jaguars.
Colts at Jaguars. Jacksonville is doing some things right now. Trevor Lawrence is throwing that ball around a little bit, and I think they're trying to find a groove. The Colts, Anthony Richardson, man, he's coming into this thing too now. He's coming back. When it comes to wins, I am choosing the Colts in that game.
All right, and let me get one more for you. Maybe your old, I don't know, Viking. I mean, maybe one of your old teams. What, the Vikings at the Bears? Any thoughts there?
Vikings at the Bears. I mean, the Bears are due for a win. I mean, Justin Fields is trying to throw the ball around, but he can't sit still because they're just gonna give him time in a sense. So, and the Vikings the same way though. And that NFC North, it gets really competitive. It's kind of any given Sunday. But with the talent levels and what I think they can pull together, I choose the Vikings.
Okay. Very good. So we appreciate those picks. Last thought, and Isaac Keys joining us here in the program. We appreciate the time. What do you remember most about your days at Morehouse?
I was just talking to my Morehouse mom the other day, and I think what I remember most is that, and I call her Morehouse mom because she was a lady who I met. And one thing about when I went to Morehouse is the registrar's office. That was like the the area where you cause all the, you can't if you can't get in the restaurant, the long lines and registration and classes, that. So you had to find a way to get in there. And I was talking the other day. So my fondest memory is actually how I got to meet all my Morehouse moms who worked in the registrar's office. And I really did it off of just charisma and character. The line was all the way out the door, and I knew the gatekeeper was at the front of the office. I noticed she drank a Coca-Cola. I don't know where I got this from at that age. I'm, 19, 18, 19 years old. So I went and got a Coca-Cola. And like the commercial said, that was Pepsi, I don't know, but have a smile. I came from there with a Coca-Cola and a smile and said, hey, I thought you might like this. And she looked at me because she was frustrated, because that's the most frustrating office to work in. She looked at me and she just started, and she smiled. And at that point, I knew our relationship started. And at that point, I never had to worry about registration and classes and all those things again. So it taught me how to network. It taught me something about myself, to use charisma. A smile can go a long way. And how when you get to know people and they really love and care for you, how much and how far they will go for you. So that, and to this day, they're all my Morehouse moms, aunties, or you want to call them. Like, we're still family to this day. And we look forward to going to homecoming in October. So, yeah.
Oh, man, that's awesome. So, again, we're not going to say the show, but I would invite you to check him out on his Instagram page, and then you'll know the show that he currently stars on. He is Isaac Keys, and he joins us here on the program. Isaac, appreciate the time. Great conversation, man. Continued success in all you do.
Man, I appreciate you having me, and you keep doing what you're doing. It's a blessing to be on your show. And yeah, man, let's keep on bringing enlightenment to sports and to HBCUs in this whole world. Let's go.
Yes, sir.